I never thought I'd be the kind of man who needed a secret. But then again, I never thought I'd feel suffocated in my own life either. It's not like I woke up one morning and decided to betray my wife. It wasn't planned, wasn't something I set out to do. It happened the way most things like this happen, slowly, subtly, slipping through the cracks of routine and predictability until one day, I looked up and realized I was in too deep. Emily and I had been married for 10 years. A solid marriage, at least on the surface. Bills paid on time, vacations planned in advance, a schedule that worked like a well-oiled machine. She was the kind of woman who made lists, who never forgot a birthday, who organized the spice rack alphabetically. Reliable, steady, predictable. And for a while, I thought that was enough. We weren't unhappy. At least, I don't think we were. But there's a difference between being fine and being alive, and somewhere along the way, I started feeling more like a piece of furniture in my own home than a man with wants and needs. There were no fights, no big blow-ups, just an unspoken understanding that we had settled into our roles and that this was it. This was life. Then came Samantha. I met her at work, one of those chance encounters that shouldn't have meant anything. She wasn't even my type, not really. Too bold, too unpredictable. The kind of woman who spoke her mind, laughed too loud, and never planned anything in advance. She lived in the moment, a stark contrast to the life I'd built with Emily. At first, it was harmless. Just conversations by the coffee machine, jokes exchanged in meetings, the occasional text about work. But then there were the little things, how she'd brush her hand against my arm when she laughed, the way she looked at me just a second too long, how easy it was to talk to her, how much I liked being around her. The first time we had a drink after work, I told myself it was just friendly. The first time I kissed her, I told myself it was a mistake. But mistakes have a way of turning into habits, and before I knew it, I was searching for ways to stretch time, to carve out moments that didn't belong to Emily, to create a space where I could be something other than her responsible, predictable husband. That's when the apartment came in. It wasn't extravagant, just a one-bedroom rental on the other side of town, the kind of place people pass by without a second glance. Unremarkable, anonymous, safe. I told myself it was just for the occasional night when I needed space, when I needed to get away. But I knew better. This was about Samantha. This was about having a place where I didn't have to be anyone's husband. I paid for everything in cash, covered my tracks, made sure there was no paper trail that could lead back to me. I used a different phone, never messaged when I was home, never let my routine slip. It was perfect. For months, it worked. I told Emily I was working late, taking on extra projects. She never questioned it. Why would she? I had always been the kind of man who came home on time, who never left unanswered questions hanging in the air. She had no reason to suspect a thing. But life has a way of unraveling even the best-kept secrets. I don't know if it was a slip-up on my end, if I forgot to clear a receipt, or if someone saw me somewhere I shouldn't have been. Maybe it was pure bad luck. But I do know one thing. Emily found out. And Emily wasn't the kind of woman who cried and begged for answers. She wasn't the kind of woman who forgave. She was the kind of woman who burned everything to the ground. Looking back, I should have known something was wrong the moment I walked through the front door. It was too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet where the house feels settled, where things are as they should be. This was the kind of silence that pressed down on my chest, heavy and expectant, like something was waiting for me on the other side. I glanced at my phone before stepping inside, a habit I'd picked up over the last few months. No text from Samantha. No missed calls. That was good. I was careful. Always careful. But Emily was sitting at the kitchen table. She never just sat there, not like this. Normally, she was moving, cleaning something, answering emails, planning the next week's meals in that little notebook she always carried around. But this time, she was just sitting, waiting. I felt a shift in the air immediately, a thick tension that made my pulse pick up even though I didn't know why yet. I forced my expression into something neutral, set my keys down on the counter, acted like this was any other night. "Hey," I said casually, shrugging off my jacket. "What's up?" She didn't answer right away, just tilted her head slightly, studying me like she was looking at a stranger. Then she slid something across the table. A piece of paper. I stared at it for a moment, my mind already moving too fast. Bills? A receipt? Something about the house. Then I saw what it was. A lease. Not our lease. The lease. The apartment. My apartment. The one Emily was never supposed to know about. Every muscle in my body locked up, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I exhaled slowly like I was just seeing an unexpected bill, something minor, something we could talk through. This isn't what you think, I said, my voice measure careful. Emily let out a slow, humorless laugh, leaning back in her chair. Her fingers drummed against the table, a quiet rhythm that made my stomach clench. Isn't it? She said, arching an eyebrow. I swallowed, keeping my face neutral. I'd gotten good at lying, at controlling my expression. It had been months of small deceptions, of carefully chosen words, of making sure I never left a single clue behind. But now, with that piece of paper between us, it was like standing at the edge of a cliff, staring down at the wreckage below. I needed to think fast. It's not what you think, I repeated, reaching for the lease, but she pulled it back before I could touch it. Emily wasn't stupid. She wasn't the type to make wild accusations without proof. If she had this, then she'd been digging. But how much did she actually know? You rent an apartment in another part of town, in cash, under your name, she said slowly, like she was explaining something simple to a child. And I'm supposed to believe this is, what? A storage unit? A meditation space? My jaw tightened. I needed a place to think. Her laugh was sharper this time, cutting straight through me. Think, she echoed, shaking her head. That's a good one. I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. This wasn't over yet. She had the lease, but she hadn't said anything about Samantha. Maybe she thought it was something else. Maybe I could salvage this. I needed space, I said, leaning against the counter. I've been overwhelmed, Emily. Work has been. Don't. She cut me off, her voice suddenly colder. Do not stand there and feed me some story about needing space like I'm an idiot. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself not to react. The anger in her voice was different from anything I'd ever heard before. I'd seen her annoyed, irritated, even pissed off. But this was something else entirely. This was pure fury. She knew. Maybe not everything, but she knew enough. I haven't done anything wrong, I said, and even as the words left my mouth, I knew how weak they sounded. Emily pushed back from the table, standing slowly. I expected yelling, screaming, maybe even tears. But there was none of that. Instead, she smiled. Not a kind smile. Not a forgiving one. It was the kind of smile that made my stomach twist, the kind that told me this was so much worse than just a fight. You know what's funny? She said, crossing her arms. I almost didn't look into it. You're good at lying, I'll give you that. You don't change your routine. You don't slip up. But you got too comfortable. And that's how people like you get caught. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. Because this wasn't an argument. This was a reckoning. Emily picked up the lease and folded it neatly, tucking it into the pocket of her cardigan. Then she turned to the stove, grabbing the kettle, filling it with water like we weren't standing in the middle of a burning wreckage. Here's what's going to happen, she said calmly. I'm going to make some tea, and you're going to pack a bag. I blinked. What? She finally turned back to me, her expression unreadable. You're leaving. A chill ran down my spine. I had expected a fight, accusations, maybe even one of those long, drawn-out arguments where she demanded to know why. But this wasn't that. This was decisive. You don't even want to talk about this? I asked carefully. Emily smiled again, and this time it was pure ice. No, she said simply. I opened my mouth, ready to argue, to deny, to fix this. But something about the way she was looking at me stopped me cold. Because I'd already lost. And the worst part? I had no idea what else she knew. I didn't pack a bag. Not because I thought I could change her mind. Something in her voice told me that ship had already sailed, but because leaving so easily would have been like admitting guilt. And that wasn't going to happen. Not yet. I needed time. Time to figure out what she knew. Time to control the damage. Time to turn this around. Emily was still by the stove, waiting for the water to boil. She was calm. Too calm. Which only made me more uneasy. The way she moved, the way she kept her back to me, like I wasn't even worth looking at anymore. I'm not leaving, I said, keeping my voice steady. She didn't respond. I stepped closer, choosing my words carefully. You're upset, and I get that. But you're jumping to conclusions. You found Elise, and now suddenly I'm guilty of something. She let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. I was really hoping you'd say that. Something about the way she said it, so sure, so prepared, made my stomach tighten. Emily turned around slowly, reaching into the drawer by the sink. My pulse spiked for a split second. Irrational panic, the kind that comes when you don't know what's coming next. But all she pulled out was her phone. Then she tapped the screen and held it up for me to see. My blood ran cold. A photo. The living room of my apartment. Our apartment, mine and Samantha's. My jacket draped over the couch. A half-empty wine glass on the table. My phone charger plugged into the wall. There was no mistaking it. No twisting this into something innocent. The photo alone wasn't enough to prove everything, but it was more than enough to destroy the lies I'd built. I swallowed hard, keeping my expression neutral. Where did you get that? Emily smirked, like she had been waiting for me to ask that question. I followed you, she said simply. Not every night. Just enough. The words landed like a punch to the gut. She had known for weeks, maybe longer, and she had waited, watching me, letting me think I was in control. I started, but she cut me off. Save it, she said, placing her phone down on the counter. I already know everything I need to know. I forced myself to breathe. This wasn't just about her knowing, it was about what she was going to do with it. Emily, I said carefully, softening my voice. I know you're angry. Angry, she repeated, eyebrows raising. No, I passed angry a long time ago. You know what I am now? Done. I clenched my jaw. You're really going to throw away 10 years over this? Her eyes darkened, and for the first time, her calm facade cracked. I didn't throw anything away. You did. The kettle whistled behind her, but she didn't move to turn it off. She just kept looking at me, waiting, daring me to deny it again. I exhaled slowly, shifting tactics. You don't want to do this. She let out another one of those quiet, humorless laughs. Oh, I really, really do. Then she reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out an envelope. I stared at it. She tossed it onto the counter like it was nothing, but I already knew what was inside. Divorce papers. My stomach twisted, but I kept my face blank. That's a little extreme, don't you think? Emily raised an eyebrow. Says the man who rented an apartment to cheat on his wife. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to think. If she had gone this far, then she had made up her mind. That was bad. I needed to slow her down, make her doubt herself, but some time to figure out how much she actually knew. Emily, I started again, lowering my voice. I know you're upset, but maybe we should talk. She shook her head. Oh, we're done talking. Then she turned off the stove, grabbed her tea mug, and walked out of the kitchen like I wasn't even there. Like I was already gone. I stared at the divorce papers, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. She wasn't playing games. She wasn't giving me a chance to explain or lie my way out of it. And worst of all, I still had no idea how much she actually knew. I didn't touch the divorce papers. I left them on the counter, right where she dropped them, like they didn't exist, like ignoring them would somehow make them disappear. But I knew better. Emily never did anything impulsively. If those papers were here, it meant she had already made up her mind. And that terrified me, because I wasn't ready to lose everything. I stood there in the kitchen, my mind racing, staring at the envelope like it was a ticking bomb. How much did she know? That was the question that kept gnawing at me. The lease was bad. The photo was worse. But did she know about Samantha? Did she have proof? Or was she just assuming? If I said too much, I'd confirm what she suspected. If I denied it, I'd have to convince her, and Emily wasn't easy to convince when she was furious. I needed more information. I took a slow breath and forced myself to walk upstairs, my steps deliberate, controlled. Emily was in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, sipping her tea like this was just another night. Like she hadn't just set my entire life on fire. She didn't look up when I entered. I leaned against the doorway, keeping my voice even. You really went out and hired a lawyer? She flipped a page in the book she was pretending to read. Didn't have to. My cousin's a lawyer. She drafted it for free. Of course. Emily had always been good at using the resources around her. She wasn't the kind of woman who stormed out or made impulsive threats. She was the kind who dismantled you piece by piece while you were still trying to figure out what went wrong. I exhaled slowly. You're really just going to throw this at me without even talking? She finally looked up, eyes cold. What exactly would you like to talk about? The apartment you've been paying for behind my back? Or the woman you've been sneaking around with? I kept my face blank. She didn't say Samantha's name. That meant she still wasn't completely sure. Already told you, I said smoothly. The apartment isn't what you think it is. She stared at me for a long moment, then tilted her head slightly, as if she was debating whether to play along. Then she let out a quiet breath and closed her book, setting it aside. You know what's fascinating about liars? She said, voice almost conversational. They always think they're smarter than the person they're lying to. It's almost funny. I clenched my jaw. I'm not lying to you. She smirked. You're still doing it. Right now. Even when you're caught. I needed to redirect this. I needed to plant doubt. Emily, come on, I said, running a hand through my hair. Do you even hear yourself? You found a lease and a picture, and now you're jumping to conclusions. She raised an eyebrow. Jumping to conclusions? Yes, I pushed. You're angry, and I get that. But you're looking at this in the worst possible way. You never even asked me why I got the apartment. She let out a small, bitter laugh. Oh, please. Go ahead. Tell me why you secretly rented an apartment across town and paid for it in cash. I could use a good bedtime story. I shrugged. I needed space. She stared at me, waiting. I've been feeling stuck. I continued, carefully choosing my words. It wasn't about you, Emily. It was about me. I needed somewhere to think, somewhere to clear my head. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd react like this, like it was some kind of betrayal. She didn't blink. For a second, I thought maybe I had planted the smallest seed of doubt, that she might hesitate, wonder if she'd misread things, if maybe she was acting too fast. Then she reached for her phone again, and I knew I was screwed, because the next thing she did was swipe up on the screen, open her messages, and play an audio recording. And Samantha's voice filled the room. Are you still coming over tonight? I miss you. A pause. Then my own voice. Yeah, babe. I'll be there after work. My stomach dropped. Emily locked the screen and set the phone on the nightstand. Then she folded her arms and stared at me like I was something disgusting she had scraped off her shoe. Go ahead, she said quietly. Tell me how I'm jumping to conclusions. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, because there was nothing left to say. The trap had already closed around me. Emily had proof, and she had been waiting for me to bury myself in more lies before slamming the door shut. I had underestimated her. Badly. She stood up slowly, her tea still in hand, looking at me like I was nothing. You know what the worst part is? She murmured, shaking her head. I actually thought you might admit it. That maybe, after everything, you'd at least have the decency to tell me the truth. I swallowed hard. Emily, listen. But she was already walking past me. She stopped in the doorway, turning just enough to glance back. You're pathetic, she said simply. Then she walked downstairs, leaving me standing there with my own voice still echoing in my ears. I clenched my fists, my breath coming fast. This was worse than I thought. She had recordings. That meant she had been collecting evidence, which meant she wasn't just leaving me. She was going to destroy me. I stood in the bedroom, my mind spinning, my body frozen. Emily had the recordings. Multiple recordings, probably. She'd been collecting evidence, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, here I was, caught with my own voice betraying me. I had two choices. I could admit everything. Try to beg, try to spin some last-minute excuse, try to salvage something. Or I could still deny. She had proof. Yes, but proof could be twisted. Voices could be manipulated. Things could be misinterpreted. If I stayed calm, if I refused to break, maybe, just maybe, there was still a way out of this. I took a deep breath, forced myself to move, control the damage. That was all that mattered now. I found her downstairs in the living room, standing by the fireplace, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. The divorce papers were still on the kitchen counter. I could see them from where I stood, like a loaded gun, waiting to go off. I walked forward, careful, like I was approaching a wild animal that might attack at any moment. Emily. She didn't respond. I exhaled, rubbed a hand over my face, acted exhausted, like I was the one who had been wronged here. You really went through my phone? I asked, my voice low, disappointed. Not angry. Never angry. That would push her further away. She finally looked at me, and I saw the flicker of something in her expression. Disgust. You really cheated on me? She shot back. Or are we just throwing accusations around now? I kept my expression neutral, shaking my head. I can't believe you would do this. She laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. Oh, that's rich. Emily, I sighed, stepping closer. You're blowing this out of proportion. You found Elise. You heard a voice on a phone. And now you think you have the whole story? I mean, come on, you know how this looks. You know how people love to twist things. Her eyes narrowed. People? People. She shook her head, laughing again, but this time it was different. Colder. You know, it's funny, she said, tilting her head. I actually thought for a second that you might just come clean. That after everything, after all the lies, you'd at least have the decency to admit it now that you're caught. I clenched my jaw. She wasn't budging. She had made up her mind. I had one last chance to turn this around. I lowered my voice, softened my expression. I get that you're hurt. But Emily, I need you to take a step back and ask yourself if you really want to do this. Do you really want to throw away 10 years over a misunderstanding? She stared at me for a long, long moment. Then she reached in her pocket, pulled out her phone, and hit play again. Babe, you know I'd rather be with you than go home to her. My stomach dropped. It was my voice. My exact words. The trap snapped shut. She clicked the phone off and set it down on the table, then turned to me with a look that was pure ice. A misunderstanding, she repeated, voice barely above a whisper. That's what you're going with. I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry. I could keep denying. I could keep fighting, but there was no point anymore. Emily wasn't just done with me. She wanted to watch me burn. I stepped back, running a hand over my face. The room suddenly felt too small, like the walls were closing in. My pulse was pounding in my ears. She took a slow breath, her fingers drumming against the table. Here's how this is going to go, she said, voice calm, controlled. You're going to sign those papers. I exhaled through my nose. Emily, listen to me. She cut in sharply, eyes flashing. You're going to sign those papers. Tonight. Because if you don't, I will drag this through court, I will take everything I can, and I will make sure everyone knows exactly what you did. She stepped closer. Your job? Your reputation? Your nice little life? I will rip it to pieces. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. You're really going to be that petty? Her smile was sharp and deadly. You have no idea how petty I can be. I felt something crack inside me. The anger, the frustration, the sheer helplessness of the situation. I had been outplayed. For months, I had been careful. I had covered my tracks, built my walls, told my lies, and still she had caught me. Emily had won. I didn't move, didn't speak. She exhaled and turned away, picking up her tea like this was nothing but a business transaction. The papers are on the counter, she said over her shoulder. You know where to find a pen. Then she walked away, leaving me standing there in the wreckage of my own making. I didn't move, didn't breathe. For the first time in months, I realized I had nowhere left to go. I didn't touch the divorce papers. Not yet. I stood in the empty kitchen, the weight of the moment pressing down on me like a slow, suffocating tide. Emily had walked away without looking back, without hesitation, without giving me even a sliver of hope that this was something I could fix. Because it wasn't. She had made up her mind. And worse, she had planned for this. For how long? Weeks? Months? Had she been watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike? Had she already known the first time I came home late, the first time I lied about working overtime? Had she been waiting for me to bury myself deeper before she made her move? I clenched my fists, forcing down the frustration bubbling in my chest. I had been careful, so careful, but all it took was one slip, one moment of overconfidence, and she had unraveled it all. Now, she wanted me gone. She wanted me to sign my life away, to pack a bag like some guilty dog with its tail between its legs and vanish. But I wasn't ready to roll over just yet. I exhaled sharply and walked out of the kitchen, moving toward the living room where I could hear her footsteps upstairs. She was probably in the bedroom, gathering more evidence, setting her plans in motion. I had to act fast. I pulled out my phone, my fingers hovering over my messages. Samantha, I needed to warn her. If Emily had proof, If she was planning to drag this into the light, then Samantha needed to be ready. I hesitated. What if she already knew? Emily was smart. Too smart. She wouldn't have come at me like this without making sure her case was airtight. If she had recordings of our conversations, then she had access to my phone. A slow, sick feeling crawled up my spine. Had she read my texts? Listened to my calls? Tracked me? My jaw tightened. This wasn't just a fight between a husband and wife anymore. This was a full-blown war. And I was losing. I deleted Samantha's name from my contacts, then wiped our messages, my hands moving fast, my heart hammering. I needed to stay ahead of Emily, at least in some way. If she hadn't gone through my phone yet, I couldn't risk giving her more ammunition. Just as I finished, I heard her footsteps coming down the stairs. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, straightening as she walked into the room. She didn't even look at me. She moved past me, heading for the coat rack by the front door, grabbing her keys. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice calmer than I felt. She pulled on her jacket, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "Not that it's any of your business anymore, but I have things to do." I stepped forward, blocking her path. "We're still married, Emily. That makes it my business." She finally looked at me, and what I saw in her eyes sent a chill through my bones. There was nothing there. No anger, no sadness, no hesitation. Just cold certainty. "You think it still means something?" she asked quietly. I exhaled sharply. "Of course it does. This thing you're doing, this plan you've put together, Emily, I get it. You're pissed. You want revenge. But we've been married for 10 years. That has to count for something." She smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was sharp, calculated, like she was about to enjoy the next word she was going to say. "Oh, don't worry," she said, voice soft. "It does count for something." She took another step forward, closing the distance between us, and for a split second, I almost thought she might hit me. Then she leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It counts for leverage." My stomach twisted. She straightened, smirking. "I talked to a lawyer already. In case you're wondering what I was doing while you were sneaking off to your little secret apartment." I swallowed hard. "Emily, do you know what a no-fault divorce is?" She cut in smoothly. "Because I looked it up, and I decided I don't want one." I shot through my veins. She let the words sink in for a moment, watching the realization hit me. I opened my mouth to speak, but she wasn't finished. "You see, sweetheart, there's a huge difference between a normal divorce and a divorce where one party can prove infidelity." She tilted her head. "And guess what? I can prove it." My hands clenched at my sides. "You don't want to go down that road." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you threatening me?" "No," I said through gritted teeth. "I'm saying you don't want to make this messier than it has to be. We can settle this like adults, quietly." She studied me for a long moment, then shook her head, laughing softly. "You are so predictable." Emily took a step back, grabbing her purse. "I don't want a quiet settlement. I don't want a clean break. I want everything. The house, the money, the savings, and you." She pulled open the front door, looking at me over her shoulder. "You get to walk away with nothing." Then she stepped outside, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, my breath coming fast, my fists shaking. I had lost control of my marriage, my lies, my life. Emily wasn't just leaving me. She was about to ruin me. And for the first time since this all started, I realized there was no way out of this. She had won, and I had nowhere left to run. The silence after Emily left was deafening. I stood in the middle of the living room, my breath heavy, my heart pounding against my ribs like a caged animal. My mind was racing, scrambling for something, anything, that could salvage this. But there was nothing left to save. She had made sure of that. Emily wasn't just divorcing me. She was gutting me, piece by piece. And I had let it happen. I had underestimated her. Thought she'd cry, maybe yell, maybe throw things. Thought she'd give me a chance to spin my way out of it like I always had. But she wasn't looking for an apology. She wasn't looking for closure. She was looking for blood. And now, she had everything she needed to take everything from me. I forced myself to move, pacing the length of the room, my hands running through my hair. I had to think. There had to be some way to slow this down, to stop her before she turned this into a public execution. But Emily wasn't just reacting. She had been planning this for months. She had the lease. the recordings, the lawyer, and worst of all, she had the narrative. By tomorrow, our friends, our families, our coworkers, they would all know. She makes sure of it. I could already picture the phone calls, the whispered conversations, the texts I wouldn't be able to answer. I wasn't just losing my wife. I was losing my entire life. I needed to get ahead of this. I pulled out my phone, my fingers moving fast. Samantha. I hesitated for only a second before dialing. It rang twice before she picked up. Hey, you. Her voice was soft, teasing. Miss me already? I swallowed hard, glancing toward the door like Emily might still be there, listening. Listen, we've got a problem. Samantha was quiet for a second. Then her tone shifted. What kind of problem? I took a deep breath. Emily knows. The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably. Knows what exactly? Everything, I said. She has proof. A lot of it. Samantha cursed under her breath. Ow, I don't know, I admitted. She's been watching me. She's had recordings. And now she's going for everything. The house, the money, the savings. You're kidding. I let out a bitter laugh. Do I sound like I'm kidding? She inhaled sharply. What do we do? I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. I don't know yet, but you need to be careful. If she has more than what she's already shown me, she might come after you too. Samantha swore again, lower this time. This is bad. No kidding. I'll call you when I figure something out, I said, already moving toward the stairs. For now, just stay quiet. Don't do anything stupid. She didn't answer right away. Then, finally, okay, just keep me updated. I ended the call. I needed time. I needed options. I froze when I reached the top of the stairs. Emily's closet was open. Half of it was empty. My stomach dropped. I rushed into the bedroom, my eyes scanning the room, my breath catching in my throat. Her jewelry box was gone. So was her suitcase. She hadn't just left for an errand. She wasn't coming back. She had packed her things and walked out for good. And that was when the truth finally hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. This was over. For months, I had been living in two separate lives, balancing on a knife's edge, convincing myself that I could keep it all, that I could have Emily and Samantha, my marriage and my escape. But I was never in control. Emily was. From the moment she found out, she'd been setting me up, watching, waiting, planning. And now, she had played her final move. Checkmate. I walked back downstairs, slow, heavy. The divorce papers were still sitting on the counter, the envelope untouched. She had left them there on purpose. She knew I would sign them, because I had nothing left to fight with. I reached for a pen. I hesitated for a long moment. Then I signed my name at the bottom, because in the end, it didn't matter. Emily had already won.